and welcome to another episode of Fit Executives Roundtable. I am so happy to have my longtime friend and partner in crime, Melissa Leslie, with us. She does most of the DEXA scans and metabolic testing and VO2 testing of our clients. And we have had a relationship for quite some time. So I was super excited to have her on with us. And so Melissa has a lot of great credentials, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about it. And then we will dig into our discussion. So, Melissa, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
Yes. So, tell the listeners more about you.
Well, as you said, my name is Melissa Leslie, and I'm an integrative health coach. I've been a health coach certified internationally for about 3 years now. And I meet with mostly females, and we look at their menopause, their hormones, where they're transitioning. And like you mentioned about the DEXA scans, I use a lot of tools like DEXAs, RMRs, VO2s, and we use those tools to help my clients get to where they need to just feel better and look better.
I love that. I love that. You said that you have been a certified health coach for 3 years. What organization did you get your certification from?
I went through the Institute of Nutrition and so IIN, and I just really, really enjoyed the program. And then I went on to get my international certification. So that was something that I really wanted to do right away. And next step is board certification. So I think as soon as the application becomes available again, that is the next step in the process.
Exciting, exciting. So tell us more about, the work you've been doing with the DEXA scans, metabolic testing, VO2. I remember you and I had a conversation back in March, and you were saying that all of these testing runs in the human performance testing framework, and you do such a beautiful job of, capturing where our clients are on the fitness spectrum. So I bet you get to see a lot. So tell us more about that process for you.
Yeah, it's a great process. I just love having when clients come in and we do DEXA tests, DEXA scans on them, RMR, and VO2, like you mentioned. And the wonderful part about that is like they all work together.
Mhm.
And as you know, when you scan someone and you can see their lean muscle mass, their fat mass, their bone health, their visceral fat, and you put all that together with their resting metabolic results and their VO2, seeing exactly where they need to be when they're working out. It's like you can take that person, and regardless of what their goals are, and you can help them achieve that. So it is fantastic. I mean, you of all people know how well clients respond to those. I mean, the results are amazing. Because not only do they see their body transform, they're able to look at the data and see how their fat mass, even though on the scale, say, for example, it says 150, but they see their muscle mass go up and their fat mass come down. And their scale might say 150 still, but they are just feeling the benefits. So, I mean,
You
that's
know, one
amazing.
of the one of the things I see with clients is when they work with us with their transformation and say, at one, it doesn't happen all the time where we may have a week where we may not see any weight loss, but when they measure the inches around their waist, they're down an inch and they're just like, oh my goodness. And then that's one of the reasons why we do DEXA scans, is that at Fit Hidden Figure, we're not a weight loss company. We're a fat loss expert. So, when we decided to start a business, we're just like, well, we want to be measured by a metric that means the most to our clients. And so when folks come to us, they're like, well, yes, I want to lose weight. And so sometimes folks will lose weight and they get to their desired weight, look in the mirror, and they're like, this was not what I was expecting at 130 pounds. You know? Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think what's really important about understanding this is it's a transformation, right? And you say this all the time that you don't want to be a smaller version of yourself currently. You want to be, a fitter, a more fit, more something that you like looking at in the mirror, change your appearance, it changes how other people see you. And then changes everything, right? It's not just from the inside you know, from yourself, but how people perceive you, how people treat you, how just everything in life will start getting better just from your sheer appearance, right? And I love how all the data marries with each other, right? So you can gauge even time frames based on certain regimens when you will lose fat, how long it'll take and what can you expect to look like in X amount of months and that kind of math, green is definitely very, very helpful.
Yeah, one of the points you made, Chris, was, folks, when we describe what we're trying to achieve, when you go with a weight loss, you start here, and weight loss alone is just going from here to a smaller version of yourself. But a real transformation is when you can go from here to a more shapelier version where your waist start to narrow. And the only way that can happen mathematically is if the body fat in the abs, which in a DEXA scan, the scientific word is android, is a body fat percentage coming down at a faster rate than the rest of the physique. So when folks get their DEXA scans and say they do a 6-month program, they will drop, say, 13, 40% body fat in their arms and legs, but in the abs alone, they're dropping like 35%, more than double the amount. And that's what we mean when we say, physique transformation. And the scale alone, to Melissa's point, can't tell you all of that. We're looking at not just fat loss, but relative fat loss in the midsection compared to the rest of the physique.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And what's really amazing, you can always tell the people who are making that transformation when they first come in and before they start specifically your program, they'll say, when I do the RMR, we ask, how much do you currently weigh? And then what is your goal weight?
Mhm,
And they give me a number.
mhm,
But when you do the follow-up after they've went through the program, whether it's a 3, 6 months, depending on what they're doing, they'll redo their RMR, maybe in 6 months to a year, whatever that time frame is. And I'll say again, what is your goal weight? And they're like, well, that really doesn't matter as much now. And you're
mhm.
like, nice.
Yeah.
Because, like they got it. It's not the weight, it's, what that DEXA looks like, what you feel like. And, they now have energy, their muscle mass is up, their fat mass is down, their visceral fat is, in a healthy range now. So it's really rewarding to hear them say that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it just occurred to me that maybe not all the listeners understand these words like visceral fat and RMR and VO2. So let's just pause for a second and let's get those definitions clear for the listeners. So, Melissa, what is visceral fat?
Visceral fat is, well, first of all, everyone, if you look at someone and you feel like you're a little bit lumpy and bumpy, your subcutaneous fat is what you see and feel. Your visceral fat is basically what is underneath that. That's the fat that's usually on top of your organs, causing inflammation. It's the bad fat. That's the fat that we do not want. It's the fat that, when I look at that from a non-medical standpoint. I would look at that and say, this is a little elevated for comfort, either do something about it like right away, or you need to see your doctor, right? And because that's the fat that would lead to heart disease. That's the fat that would cause all of those metabolic diseases that we don't want any client to have or any person to have. So the visceral fat is the bad fat.
And just for listeners to understand, what is a threshold of visceral fat that is considered healthy in an adult?
So for our purposes, where we scan, we say 0 to 1 pound. Like
Mhm.
1 pound is the max. And
Mhm.
if it's anything over 1 pound, if it's a little bit over, I will just tell them the basics of how they can get that down. But if it's double or more, that is something that I'm adamant about. Like, you need to really focus here. And if you don't, then, yes, you need to see your doctor too. Definitely, especially if there's a history of, say, heart disease in the family, see your doctor. However, a lot of that can be, addressed by diet and exercise. And that is something, once someone changes their diet primarily, that is one of the first numbers that you'll see just start dropping. And it's beautiful when someone comes in and you're like, oh my gosh, like it's reduced by half. And so I always say to clients, I'm like, oh my gosh, you just improved your health by this percentage, because it's not about the fat like you see on this, it's like a health number, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like, this is definitely changing your life number. So
Mhm.
that's good to see.
Absolutely. And just for the kind of data that we get to see as we're coaching clients, we've helped folks with visceral fat as high as 3 or more, and we've helped them get it all the way down to 0.00 visceral fat. I try to keep my visceral fat at 0.00 as much as possible. Even if you have a week where it's high stress or something like that, you can even see a bump in the visceral fat. So that's a very strong indicator of how you're doing with your health. So thank you so much for the definition. So now tell us, what is RMR? What does it stand for? What does it test? What does it mean?
RMR is your resting metabolic rate. And
Mhm.
what that tests, what we look at is your metabolism.
Mhm.
So, well, first of all, you come in and you have to be fasted, and you cannot exercise prior to that, because we want you at your resting rate.
Mhm.
And so it's a mouth breathing test. It takes 10 minutes. It's easy peasy. And you will determine after 10 minutes, we're able to look at what the metabolism is of the person, whether it's normal, whether it's slow, whether it's high, and then also what their resting energy expenditure is. So we're able to see how many calories they're burning at rest. And so those numbers, based on those numbers, we're able to evaluate where they need to be in their calories. If they're not going to exercise, number one, which of course we encourage everyone to exercise.
Mhm.
But if they do exercise, we are able to show them, here is your weight loss zone, here is your maintenance zone. And where they're able to add calories back in with exercise.
Mhm.
So, or additional calories in addition to the resting energy expenditure. So, and furthermore, one more thing is we're also able, because remember I said we ask them, or I ask them, when they first have their first RMR done, what is your goal weight? We are able to determine based on that how long or how soon they can get to their goal weight
Mhm.
just on their calories alone.
Absolutely.
That's
And
so
it,
good.
and in terms of how we interpret that with behavior, and just so the listeners know, we never coach an individual on nutrition or training unless they get a DEXA scan, a metabolic testing, and a VO2 test. We're going to talk about the VO2 test next, right? But for our purposes, when we get the DEXA scan, which is considered the gold standard on body fat percentage, say somebody weighs 150 pounds, it says how much of that is muscle, how much is fat, how much is bone. We take the muscle mass to determine how much protein is necessary to either maintain that muscle mass or grow that muscle mass, right? So that sets our protein targets. And then we use a metabolic testing now to figure out, okay, as Melissa was saying, your resting metabolic rate plus other activities plus working out, and determine how much calories they can burn in a given day. That number helps us to determine what it would take to get the client in a caloric deficit. And it's that caloric deficit that leads to body fat. But we have to be careful, because if the deficit is too wide, then they can't grow muscle, right? But then if there's no deficit, then we're not experiencing fat loss. So this is where the whole math and the science and, running the numbers, really make a difference. And that's why I value this human performance testing, because without that data, I literally couldn't do my job, and, it's one of the reasons why, when you go to our website, you see these dramatic transformation is because we're not guessing, when it comes on to nutrition and training. We have solid data that we're depending on to give you a solid strategy that will get you to your results.
Right. And isn't it amazing? I'm sure you'll agree how many individuals, they don't eat enough. They'll come to you, they'll come to me and they'll like, oh, well, I'm watching my weight. And so I've just been eating. I'm like, you're not eating enough. Like, you have to, if you want to lose weight and if you want to increase your muscle, you need to eat more than 1,000 calories a day or less, right? I mean, it's amazing how few calories people eat, or they'll eat. The other question is, which I know you take care of this. I'll ask, so how's your nutrition? How's your diet look? And they're like, oh, I have a really good, healthy diet. And then I'll look at their visceral fat number. I'm like, you might need to describe your definition of healthy to me because I know like
Exactly.
something in there, and their diet will look a little bit different. So we have to reevaluate what healthy means and clean.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I would say 90% of the people who come to us that are overweight or out of shape don't eat enough. And it usually starts with they have a salad, or I didn't eat, all of the potatoes today, only half the potatoes, or there's only one donut on the counter, not two donuts. Like, they think by limiting the choice that they do make to almost nothing, that's being healthy, right? And really, what we find out of the first month is, we go through these phases of, man, this is so much food, I can't keep up, right? Then by month 3, it's like, I'm starving. Can I eat more food? And then these rapid results just, I mean, they just fly off the shelf, right? But I wanted to ask you a question before we go to the VO2. One of the things I see about visceral fat, because I was someone who came with more visceral fat than others when I first started this journey. And what I noticed when my visceral fat started going down, I was breathing better, right? I was being able to, run or do any type of activity, let alone lose fat and lose weight, right? So I think it's important, right? We say it's bad fat, right? And we see what we, can burn at resting, but this bad fat is taking up space in our bodies, right? It's constricting airflow, it's constricting blood flow, right? I mean, you say bad fat, but this is like really bad stuff. Like, the best way I always like to tell everyone is like, all right, go drive your car. But before you go, I'm gonna stick 20 people in there. And I want you to go as fast as you possibly can in your car, right? That's visceral fat. No one can see it. It's just in your car, right? And by that number alone, you can't move fast. So I found that, in the beginning, I could barely run a mile, barely run half a mile without dying, right? Because I had, visceral fat. But over time, I was like, oh, I ran 5 miles? Like it just started to change. So, I guess my question or point is that true, right? Is that factual as far as that it takes up space, it constricts like blood flow? Like these are health concerns. I don't think we touched on how you get visceral fat, right? You said stress, right? But people don't understand that stress is a killer. Like that, this shows that stress is a killer, this one test.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things I always tell everyone is that regardless of anything, we can look at your muscle mass, we can look at your fat mass, we can look at, but if someone has a higher visceral fat number, I say to them the top 5 things that you can either eliminate or reduce severely to get that number down is number one, alcohol. Either eliminate or reduce severely alcohol. That's number one. Number two is sugar. That's, those 2 things. The third thing is processed foods, fried foods. That all is one big thing. And I'm talking about like all processed foods and fried foods. And some uh, people who have special diets, they don't realize that some of their foods are processed, right? They just think it's just whatever. I'm like, turn it over, look at the ingredients. And then the other 2 things are make sure you get enough sleep and reduce your stress. And furthermore, if you take all 5 things and you just step back and you look at those, look how they all work together. When we don't get enough sleep, we have higher stress in our body, then we make poor food choices, which then leads to, if it's alcohol, for example, a worse night of sleep because our bodies, you might pass out and you might fall asleep quickly, but your body is not at rest. And if you use any type of tracker, whether it's an Aura, a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, whatever you decide to use, if you take and you start tracking when you have alcohol and when you don't, I mean, it's amazing while you're sleeping. And women in particular, once you hit perimenopause, do you know it takes about 5 days for one glass of wine to sort of process through your body because your thyroid is not processing it properly. Then you have your liver and your kidneys, which, they're all connected. And as you're saying, Chris, with visceral fat, if you have that visceral fat on your organs, again, your liver, your kidneys, your everything within this area, your stomach area, your body cannot pump, it cannot function, it cannot process, for example, alcohol and sugar and all those things effectively. Your body has to work overtime. And then what happens? You're exhausted again. Like give your body a break.
Rinse, wash, repeat, rinse, wash, repeat. Then you come see
Yeah.
us, right? Like that's, unfortunately, that's how people get to these health challenges, and then they seek us after the fact, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of this can be prevented just by hearing this message. So, Corinne, you wanted to go to a VO2 because this is the game changer to me as far
Mhm.
as this whole process.
So yes, Melissa, tell us about the VO2.
Yeah, I am so excited about the VO2. So where we do the VO2 currently is we recently swapped out the software and that reporting is like, oh my goodness. So
Beautiful.
I know it is. I'm so excited. I will, full disclosure, of course, I've done a DEXA, RMR, and VO2. And with the old system, I'm like, yeah, I've done a VO2, but I really don't feel the need to do it again. I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not any of those things. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do my VO2 because what it shows is, number one, I'm going straight to the report. What it shows is where your heart rate is. And it shows you a line, like when your heart rate is here, you're burning this much fat. When it's here, you're burning this much fat and this many carbs. And it has this big chart. So you can pinpoint exactly, without guessing, where you need to be to exercise and where you need to be to effectively burn fat and effectively burn the appropriate amount of carbs without losing muscle mass.
Mhm.
There's so many people who do not believe that you can lose weight without losing muscle mass. And I'm here to tell you, you absolutely can lose weight and gain muscle mass if you do it properly. And the VO2 max, I mean, it not only does that, but I mean, it really in the longevity space, it helps to show benchmarks of where you are from a fitness perspective, which then shows, your quality of life, and how that all looks, down the road. But most importantly, I'm just excited about that. Helping clients use this tool to effectively exercise properly. And it's like the most exciting thing since, you know,
Sliced
whatever
bread.
day that you think is the
Yep.
most exciting.
Well, so if you can elaborate on that, what is the VO2 measuring? What metric? The volume of oxygen, right? Like how much is your body pumping? Can you explain kind of the science of the VO2? Because I know we wear those masks,
Mhm.
right? So you can restrict your airflow while you're doing the test. But what is it measuring when you're getting those results?
Yeah, I think Corinne has a better description, but in what it doesn't necessarily restrict your airflow. What it does is it captures it. And
Okay.
so what it's able to do is you're able to the oxygen coming in and the carbon dioxide coming out, the machine is able to then determine how much oxygen you're able to put into your body and push down on through your extremities. And so that is basically what it does. And then in addition with your heart rate, because you have a chest heart rate monitor on, and we use a Polar, and it is part of that is really seeing when you're doing this test. And traditionally, it's a treadmill test. And so we're able to see like slowly going up, how your heart rate's coming up. And then I'll tell clients, push yourself as much as you can. And then when you feel like you can't do anymore, push yourself more, right? Just to get your max, like push yourself like you're running from a bear. And then when you're done, then you go into that recovery. And then again, the recovery, we're looking for oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, where your heart rate is, and taking those elements to determine your fitness level and your recovery rate. Your recovery rate is so important that people just do not give it enough credit.
So I love how you put that all together. So when it comes down to the VO2, what my understanding of the VO2 is, you have the mask on, and you're rightly said it's a restriction. Um, what it's measuring is as you're doing as you're breathing out, it's measuring the carbon dioxide to determine if you're in an aerobic or anaerobic state. And as you move through the different processes, as Melissa was saying, it will tell you how much of the calories burned is fat versus carbs. And for us, that number, to a mathematician, that number is critical because when we see that number on the chart, and we see the heart rate you have to maintain to burn the most amount of fat, we take that number and we write that number. We're just like, every time you do cardio, you stay at that number and stay at that number for an hour, right? And if you do that a couple times a week, what happens? Voila, fat loss. So that is how we combine all of those three different metrics to get these transformations. And, you just did a scan for one of our clients just to show you, you made the point, Melissa, that you can lose weight and grow muscle at the same time. Most people don't believe that's the case. And we have, our client Priscilla, for example, which you scanned for us, she lost about 25 pounds, but gained 14 pounds of muscle, losing like close to 40 pounds of fat, right? And you did her scan. Tell us about that.
Oh, her last scan.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I actually had to go back and relook at the numbers because I thought clearly something's wrong here. I'm like, no, in 2 weeks' time, she was able, because it's very specific, right? So it's like, here's your heart rate. This is where you need to be training. This is how much food you need to be eating. And she increased her muscle mass. I believe it was like 7.5 pounds or something like
Yep.
that in
Right.
2 weeks.
Spot on. Yeah.
And she decreased her fat pounds. Was it like 4.9 or something like that?
4.1.
4.1.
4.1.
Okay. And so it was like, I looked at that and I'm like, wait, when was the last time you were here? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it really has only been 2 weeks. But yeah, I mean, but I've seen not quite those results, but I've actually seen that happens over and over when you use the tools, right? You
Absolutely.
have the tools available, and this is what you do. This is how you use them. And these are the results. Now, Priscilla, Priscilla has been really, really, I can't believe her transformation, number one. She's just an amazing woman. And, but her transformation, she's dedicated, and there's even some of your other clients, I do know, even the ones who think like, oh, I didn't do well this week, right? I'm like, trust the process, get on that DEXA scan because, and they are usually surprised, like, oh my gosh, I really thought I blew it this week. I'm like, that's the beauty. Once you start moving your body and you start doing what you're supposed to, your body sort of intuitively, you're working together, your body and your brain.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, but yeah, but Priscilla's, oh, I couldn't even.
So I have to tell you some backstory of that. First of all, to the listeners, you're hearing us talk about Priscilla. Go back to our very first episode because Priscilla was the guest on the very first episode. But the story behind that was Priscilla was coming back from Thanksgiving, and she was coming to train with me, right? And I said, "Oh, you're back in town. Why don't you just get a DEXA scan?" And she goes, "I think not. Like getting a DEXA scan the day after Thanksgiving sounds like torture, right?" And I was telling her that, if you have been diligent for the last 2 weeks, right, and all you had was Thanksgiving dinner, then that should not mess up your DEXA scan results. As a matter of fact, eating more food around Thanksgiving, will increase your glycogen stores, giving you a better DEXA scan if you were really following the plan. And so she was so unwilling to go get the DEXA scan. And I'm like, I knew she was unwilling, but I decided I was going to push her anyway. So she went to get the DEXA scan, and we went to training right afterwards. And she said, "Yeah, Melissa scanned me." And she's like, "What is Kareem doing to you?" And the big news is what Priscilla and I have been doing is, most of her transformation was done in her in-home gym. And in the last, I would say 3 to 4 weeks, we transitioned from her home gym to a gym called DMV Iron. It's a gym out in Alexandria City, it's where a lot of the bodybuilders go to train. And so we've been working out of there. And with that gym, we can put heavier weight on her and hit certain muscle groups that we were not able to target with just an in-home gym. So that is what we've been doing. And then to your point with the VO2, When she came in and do the VO2 test and she saw the heart rate to burn that fat mass, this girl, after strength training, she literally goes on a treadmill and stays at that same heart rate for 38 minutes, 5 to 6 times a day, right?
You
So
mean a week?
yeah, 5 to 6 times a week. And that's what's responsible for that 4.1 pounds of fat loss in that 2 week period. She literally took the data from the VO2, and I'm using the data from the DEXA and the metabolic testing. And also, she did a new metabolic testing recently, and we found out that we were underfeeding her because her metabolism shot up. So we increase the food. That's another thing too. So this is us using the data in real time to get results like that. So I'm so happy you're able to fit her in at the last minute and be so flexible, because that data, we really needed that data to see, what was really happening.
So
Yeah,
can
I
I,
was so, I'm sorry, Chris.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I was so excited to be, she was my last client that day. And I'm like, what a way to like end your day.
So I was just gonna ask one thing we didn't address, and I know we're, just running up on time here, but one reason why you made the shift from the home gym to go to a gym like that is because her bones are stronger. On the DEXA scan, we can see bone strength go up, which means that you can put more weight on, right? You have the bone structure, and we can visibly see bone increase, over time, getting stronger along with the muscles. Like there's more white, there's more bone, you don't see those dense areas, or opaque areas on the bone when you look at the DEXA scan itself, right? But my point is you were able to see from the DEXA scan, hey, you gotta stop lifting these 15-pound dumbbells, right? They're not, you're stronger than that. Let me show you, because you have the bone strength and you have the muscle now, because I can see it on the DEXA scan. And when we start making that transition from this data, it's even amplified, like it goes up even more, right?
And
Um,
And just to round out all of what was said about this, in the case of Priscilla, the entire home gym experience, she lost 35 pounds of fat and gained 10 pounds of muscle in just the home gym. So the message here is that you don't need a whole lot of equipment to get these types of results. Just a cardio machine at home and a handful of dumbbells can definitely do the trick, right? And as Chris said, when we saw the bone density, we knew we could put heavier weight on her. So guys, this is all we have for you today. I hope you really enjoyed this session. I have been wanting to do this with Melissa for so long, because this is data that you guys will really need to learn about. If you're in Washington, D.C., there are DEXA scan, metabolic testing, and VO2 testing facilities. We go to a company called Composition ID to get those. Book your DEXA scans. We'll put information in the link for you. But get this data, know where you stand. It's super important. And Melissa, where can our followers go to find you, to work with you, and that kind of thing? Tell us.
Well, I have a link tree and it's just linktree/Melissa Leslie.
Oh, perfect. Easy enough. All
Mhm.
right. Well, thank you, Melissa, for joining us and sharing this wealth of wisdom with our listeners. We really appreciate
we
it.
we
Well,
love
thank
you.
you so much.
All
All
right.
right. Thanks, Melissa. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.